The sun was warm that afternoon, and the garden looked like a dream. White chairs, pink balloons, and tables covered with little cupcakes and gifts wrapped in bows. Everyone was smiling, laughing, and taking pictures. It was Emily's baby shower, and she was glowing in a tight pink dress that showed off her belly. Margaret stood near the edge of the tent, clutching a small white box with baby socks she had knitted herself. She wore her favorite beige cashmere sweater, soft, clean, and full of memories. Her late husband had given it to her for their last Christmas together. It wasn't expensive, but it made her feel close to him. She wanted to look nice, to feel part of this happy day. But from the moment she arrived, she felt out of place. Emily's friends were all young and loud, wearing bright dresses and shiny heels. They looked her up and down with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Margaret smiled back anyway, because that's what mothers do, they try. Emily spotted her and waved. "Oh, Margaret, you made it," she said in a voice that sounded too cheerful. She came closer, touching her arm lightly. "We were just saying how sweet it is that you still wear those classic clothes." Margaret laughed softly. "Well, I guess I'm old-fashioned," she said. Emily's friend giggled. "It's kind of cute, like a grandma from one of those old movies." Margaret forced a smile. "I am going to be a grandma soon," she said, trying to keep her tone warm. But the girls were already looking away, whispering to each other. Margaret turned to find her son, Daniel. He was across the garden, busy helping the hostess with decorations, barely glancing at her. Her heart pinched a little. She knew he loved Emily deeply, and maybe that love made him blind to how Emily often treated her. Still, she hoped today would be peaceful. When it was time for games, Emily clapped her hands. "Let's make Grandma play first," she said. Everyone cheered. Margaret smiled nervously. They blindfolded her for the Guess the Baby Food game. Someone fed her a spoon of something sour, and everyone laughed when she made a face. "Oh no, Grandma doesn't like mush," one of Emily's friends shouted. Daniel chuckled, but he didn't stop them. He didn't say a word. Margaret tried to laugh along, but her throat felt tight. She reminded herself that it was Emily's day, that it wasn't worth causing a scene. Later, as she stood by the table pouring herself a cup of pink punch, Emily came up behind her. The music was loud, and everyone was still talking. "Careful, Margaret," Emily said sweetly. "Don't spill on your pretty sweater." Margaret turned to smile, but before she could speak, Emily lifted the ladle and tipped it straight over Margaret's chest. The cold pink punch splashed down her front, soaking the cashmere, dripping onto her hands and the floor. For a moment, everything froze. Then came the laughter. "Oh my God," Emily said, covering her mouth in fake shock. "I'm so sorry. Guess that sweater wasn't real cashmere after all." One of her friends shouted, "Cheap sweater, cheap grandma," and the whole group burst into laughter. The hostess tried to hide her smile. Daniel looked at his phone, pretending to scroll. He didn't say a word. Margaret stood there in silence. The punch was sticky and cold, her sweater clinging to her skin. The room spun around her. The laughter, the pink decorations, the smell of cupcakes. Every sound felt far away, like she was underwater. She wanted to cry, but she didn't. She just stood up straight, brushed the wet fabric gently, and smiled, a small, calm smile that no one expected. "It's all right," she said quietly. "Things like this happen." Emily tilted her head. "You're not mad?" "No," Margaret said softly. "I've seen worse days." Her voice was steady, and that steadiness made a few people stop laughing. She turned and walked toward the table with the gifts, each step slow and careful, as if she wasn't soaked in pink. Inside, though, something sharp was rising in her chest. A quiet strength. She had promised herself she wouldn't ruin Emily's special day, no matter what. But now, as she saw her late husband's sweater dripping with punch, she felt that promise slipping away. Emily had gone too far. Margaret looked at her son again. He still hadn't looked up. His silence said more than words ever could. She placed her gift, the tiny knitted socks, on the pile of fancy wrapped boxes. Her hands trembled slightly. Around her, the laughter had returned, softer now, but still there. Margaret took a deep breath. The sweater was ruined, but something inside her was very clear. She would not leave this garden the same woman who walked in. As the music started again, she whispered to herself, "If they want a show, they'll get one." Her heart was calm now. Her plan was forming, not out of anger, but out of truth. She had carried a secret for weeks, something she had hoped she'd never have to reveal. But Emily had made her choice today. And so had Margaret. While Emily danced with her friends, laughing and posing for pictures, Margaret quietly picked up her purse. Inside, folded neatly, was a small white envelope, one that Emily herself had left behind. Margaret ran her finger along the edge of it and smiled softly. "Cheap sweater," she whispered. "We'll see who's cheap, dear." The music grew louder, the laughter returned, but Margaret's calmness cut through the noise like a knife. Tomorrow, everyone would remember the pink spill, but not for the reason they thought. Because the real mess was about to begin. The baby shower was still noisy with laughter, but the joy in the air felt thin now. Margaret could feel eyes on her, even though people pretended to move on. She sat quietly at the corner of the long gift table, her soaked sweater sticking to her skin, drying in patches under the warm afternoon sun. Her fingers rubbed against the edge of her purse again and again. Inside, she could feel the envelope pressing back like a heartbeat, small, white, and powerful. Emily was across the garden, smiling for photos, holding her belly like a prize. Her friends took turns posting pictures, tagging her, shouting compliments. Margaret watched her and thought about all the times she had tried to make peace. When Daniel first brought Emily home, Margaret had tried so hard to like her. She had cooked dinner, complimented her dress, listened to her stories about work. But no matter what she did, Emily always found a way to make her feel small, too old, too quiet, too cheap. A week ago, Emily had come to Margaret's house, pretending to be sweet. She said she needed help with baby laundry and borrowed a small box of family photos. But when she left, Margaret found an envelope under the sofa cushion. It had fallen from Emily's purse. The words printed on it had made Margaret's heart stop. Paternity test confidential. She had opened it because her hands were shaking too badly not to. Inside was a receipt from a private lab. The test had been ordered under Emily's name and another man's, Tyler, the same coworker she always mentioned with a strange little smile. The date on the form was from the month before her wedding to Daniel. Margaret had cried that night, not for herself, but for her son. Daniel had always been gentle, too trusting. He had loved Emily from the start and believed every word she said. The next day, Margaret had taken the papers to Daniel's house. He didn't yell, didn't break anything. He just sat in silence for a long time, staring at the floor. Finally, he said, "Let's wait until the baby's born. I'll handle it quietly. She doesn't need to know I know." Margaret had agreed, for him, for peace. But standing here now, wearing her late husband's ruined sweater and hearing people whisper, she knew peace wasn't what Emily deserved anymore. The hostess called out, "Time for gifts," and everyone clapped. Emily walked to the gift table, still glowing, her pink dress shimmering in the sunlight. Margaret stood slowly, her knees trembling a little. She picked up her small white box with the knitted socks and placed the envelope beside it. Her heart was pounding, but her face stayed calm. "Emily," she said softly, loud enough for the guests nearby to hear. "Before you open my gift, I want to share something special with you." Emily smiled with her lips but not her eyes. "Oh, something handmade again," she said. Margaret nodded. "Yes, it's handmade and it's honest. Not many things are both these days." A few people chuckled awkwardly. Emily reached for the box, but Margaret placed her hand over it. "Wait," she said. "This little envelope first." Emily frowned. "What envelope?" "This one," Margaret said, lifting it gently from the table. Her voice stayed soft, but it carried across the garden. "You left it at my house last week. I thought it might be important." The laughter stopped. Emily blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Margaret held up the envelope. "You remember Tyler, don't you? The one from work." A murmur went through the guests. Daniel looked up from across the yard, his face tightening. Emily froze, color draining from her cheeks. "Why would you bring that up here?" Emily whispered harshly. Margaret tilted her head. "Because you brought this on yourself, dear. You poured punch on my sweater, the one my husband gave me before he died. You humiliated me in front of everyone. And now, I think it's only fair everyone sees who's really wearing something fake." She opened the envelope. Inside were the printed pages, the receipt from the DNA lab, the emails, and the messages Emily had carelessly saved. Margaret's voice was calm, even gentle, as she read. Sample collection date, February 18th, Mother, Emily Ross. Alleged father, Tyler Grant. The crowd went completely silent. Only the rustle of balloons in the breeze broke the stillness. Emily's lips trembled. You went through my things?" Margaret shook her head. "No, you left it behind. I didn't plan to say anything. I came here to celebrate, even after seeing this. But you decided to shame me, to laugh at me in front of my son. I think you've mistaken kindness for weakness. Daniel stood up from his chair. Mom, please, he said quietly. His face was pale. Emily turned to him in panic. Daniel, she's lying. That was nothing. It's just a mistake, an old report. Stop, Daniel said sharply. It was the first time Margaret had heard that tone in years. Just stop. The guests began to whisper. Some looked away. A few took out their phones, pretending to text, but everyone was listening. Margaret placed the papers back in the envelope and set it on the gift table. That's all I needed to say, she said softly. I'll leave the rest to you, Daniel. Then she turned and began to walk away. Her sweater was dry now, but the stain had turned darker, a soft pink shadow across her chest. Emily's voice cracked behind her. You've ruined everything. You crazy old. Margaret didn't stop. She just smiled faintly and said over her shoulder, No, Emily. You ruined it yourself the moment you thought cruelty was free. The air was thick with whispers as she stepped out of the tent. She could feel the heavy silence behind her, the kind that comes right before something breaks. In that silence, Daniel looked down at the envelope. Emily tried to grab his arm, but he pulled away. I'll read it, he said. And then we'll see what's left to celebrate. Margaret didn't turn around. She didn't need to. The truth was already working its way through the noise. The sun had started to set, and as she walked down the path toward the gate, a soft wind brushed against her damp sweater. For the first time that day, she breathed easily. She had done what was right. She hadn't screamed or thrown anything. She had simply told the truth. Behind her, the party music had stopped. And somewhere inside the garden, the first cracks of Emily's perfect life had begun to show. Margaret stopped at the garden gate, her hand on the iron latch. The evening light made long shadows on the grass. Behind her, the chatter had gone quiet again. She heard fast footsteps on the stone path. Daniel's voice came first, low and tight. Mom, wait. She turned. His face looked older than in the morning, like he had walked through a storm in an hour. He held the white envelope in one hand. His other hand shook. I didn't want it to happen like this, he said. I wanted to keep things calm. I know, Margaret said softly. I tried to keep it calm too. She looked down at her sweater, then back at him. But there is a line, and she crossed it. Daniel nodded once, hard. He took a breath and turned to the tent. People were peeking over gift bags and through the clear tent flap, eyes wide, mouths small. Emily stood near the center, her cheeks streaked with makeup and tears, one hand on her belly, the other clenched at her side. Daniel, she said, voice shaking. Tell your mother to stop. Please. She's lying. She hates me. Daniel walked forward, slow and steady. No, he said. She doesn't hate you. She hates lies. Emily's jaw trembled. It was just a test I looked at online. It didn't mean anything. Then why is his name on the receipt? Daniel asked. His voice was calm, but it had weight now. Why is Tyler Grant listed as the alleged father? A small gasp went through the room like a breeze. Someone dropped a plastic cup. The hostess pressed the music remote, but didn't press play. Emily darted a quick glance toward the gate, toward the street. Her phone flashed with a notification, and she turned it face down. This is a misunderstanding. I was scared. You were working late. We had fights. I made a mistake before we got engaged. Daniel's eyes were red, but he did not shout. You made a series of choices. That is different from a mistake. He opened the envelope and slid out a second paper. The corners were worn now from his hands. And there's something Mom didn't say. Because she wanted me to speak for myself. He looked at the guests, at the friends who had laughed when the punch hit the sweater. I took a test too. He paused. Months ago. Emily blinked fast. What? What are you talking about? Daniel looked at her. I found the email on your laptop when it pinged during dinner. I didn't touch your things. It popped up by itself. The lab's name. The subject line said paternity test results available. I asked you about it that night. You said it was spam. He let out a hollow laugh. Spam that used your name and a man named Tyler Grant. Emily's throat made a small sound. Daniel, I made an appointment the next day, he continued. I sent in my own sample with your approval form from the hospital visit. I told them to match it to the baby's screening that was already on file. He swallowed. 2 weeks later, I got the result. The probability that I am the father was 0. The tent seemed to bend inward, air pulled tight. Margaret stood still by the gate, her chest aching, but proud of his steady voice. Emily took a step forward. Why didn't you tell me? Daniel looked almost surprised. Because I wanted to see who you were without the test talking for us. I wanted to see if you would choose truth on your own. He looked down at her belly, then back into her eyes. You didn't. Emily's shoulders shook. She glanced sideways at her circle of friends. None of them moved closer. One stared at the floor. Another wiped a dot of punch from her shoe, suddenly very busy. Daniel, Emily said, softer now. I was scared. You're good. You're safe. Tyler is fun, but he doesn't stay. I thought if I married you, everything would be okay. I thought the baby would pass as yours, and we would never have to talk about it. Daniel shut his eyes for a moment, then opened them. You called my mother cheap in front of everyone. You poured punch on the last piece of my father I have left in this house. And you wanted me to live a lie because it made your world easier to hold. I wanted a family, Emily whispered. So did I, he said. But family without truth is a stage play. It wears nice clothes and says pretty lines, and then the lights go dark, and there is nothing behind the set. The hostess finally found her voice. Maybe we should take a break? Get some air. No, Daniel said gently. We're done taking breaks. He turned so everyone could hear him without raising his voice. There's one more thing. He held up the paper in his hand, the one with the clinic letterhead. Mom didn't ambush you. I asked her to be quiet. She kept my secret to protect my plan. I was going to move out after the baby was born, to avoid stress on you and the child. I had spoken to a lawyer. I had arranged everything quietly. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the balloons seemed to stop moving. He looked at Margaret and gave the smallest nod, a thank you without words. Then he faced Emily again. But today, when you hurt her for sport, you made the choice for me. You showed me what my life would be if I stayed. I won't build a home where cruelty is a joke. Emily's eyes were wild now. You can't leave. You can't do this here. I can, Daniel said, his voice flat but not cruel. And I am. He slid off his wedding ring and placed it on the gift table, right beside the little box with the knitted socks. The ring looked hard and cold against the soft white lid. Margaret felt a sting in her eyes. She took one careful step back toward the tent, then another, giving him the space to stand but close enough to catch him if he fell. He didn't. Emily clutched her belly. What about the baby? The baby deserves truth, he said. Whoever the father is should step up and be one. If it is Tyler, then he should be told. If he refuses, then the court will tell him. A phone buzzed loudly on the table. The name Tyler flashed across the screen before the lock dimmed it. A few heads turned. Emily's face crumpled. Daniel breathed out long and slow. There. The name is spoken. He looked around at the faces, the people who had joined the laughter earlier. We can all stop pretending we didn't hear it. No one laughed now. Someone handed Margaret a napkin, finally. She took it politely and dabbed at the damp pink stain that had dried into her sweater like a bruise. Daniel stepped to his mother. His eyes were wet, but his jaw was steady. Let's go home, he said. Margaret nodded. I'm ready. As they walked toward the gate, Emily's voice followed, small and hard at the same time. Daniel, please. I love you. He paused. The evening air held still. He didn't turn around. I wanted to love you for the rest of my life, he said. But I can't love a mask. He opened the gate for Margaret. She stepped through. He followed. The latch clicked softly behind them. On the sidewalk, the world felt ordinary again. Cars passed, a dog barked, a child laughed down the block. It was strange how normal everything was while a life cracked open 2 meters away. Daniel looked up at the sky. I thought I was weak, he said. You were kind, Margaret answered. Kindness is not weakness. But today you learned where to place it. He nodded. They began to walk. Behind them, the tent was silent, like a stage after the curtain falls. Inside, gifts sat unopened, cupcakes waited without hands, and the ring shone against a small white box made by a woman who had been called cheap and chose, instead, to be true. The night after the baby shower was quiet in Margaret's small kitchen. The clock ticked. A pot of tea steamed between 2 cups. Daniel sat at the table with his hands around the warm mug, staring at nothing. His wedding ring was gone, and the pale band on his finger looked like a mark left by the sun. Margaret didn't fill the silence with advice. She knew grief has its own slow language. She folded a towel and laid her sweater across the counter to dry. The pink stain had lightened after she washed it gently by hand. It was not perfect, but it was clean. She thought of her husband and the day he'd wrapped this sweater around her shoulders. She pressed her palm to the fabric like a prayer. I keep replaying it, Daniel said finally. All tiny moments I didn't want to see. Margaret sat across from him. You saw enough, she said. And when it was time, you acted. They heard the buzz of Daniel's phone on the table. He didn't pick it up. It buzzed again. He flipped it over. The name on the screen said Emily, home. He let it ring out. Another message. Then another. I'll answer tomorrow, he said. Sleep first, Margaret replied. No one thinks clearly in the dark. He nodded and stood. At the doorway he paused, his eyes on the sweater. Do you think the stain will show? Maybe a little, she said. Some marks don't leave. But you can live with them. They don't hurt after a while. He nodded again and went to the guest room. Morning brought thin, cool light. Daniel brewed coffee and opened curtains. Margaret's phone rang this time. A number she didn't know. She almost let it pass, then answered. Mrs. Hale, a man said, careful, polite. This is Tyler Grant. Margaret's hand stilled on the curtain cord. She looked at Daniel. He watched her face, waiting. I would like to talk, Tyler said. To you both, if you allow it. I think I've made a mess I can't run from. An hour later, Tyler stood on the porch with his cap in his hands. He was taller than she expected, with tired eyes and a clean shirt that had been ironed quickly. He did not try to smile. Come in, Margaret said. They sat at the table. No one touched the coffee. Daniel spoke first. You knew about the test, he said. Tyler nodded once. I knew she ordered it. I didn't think she'd send it. Then she did, and we never spoke about the result. She said she was marrying you. She said it would be better for the baby. I told myself it wasn't my business anymore. He stared at his hands. That was a lie I told to keep my life easy. Daniel's voice was flat. Is the baby yours? I don't have the paper, Tyler said. But I think so. I'm ready to take the test and accept whatever it says. He swallowed. If it is mine, I'll step up. Child support. Visits. The whole thing. I won't hide. Margaret watched his face. She had practiced hating this man in her mind, but she saw something else now. Fear, yes, but also a hard kind of honesty that had arrived late and wanted to stay. Emily? Daniel asked. She's scared, Tyler said. She called me all night. She said she only wanted a calm life. She said she didn't mean to hurt anyone. He shook his head. The truth is, we hurt people when we try to borrow their goodness and spend it like money. They went together to a small clinic that afternoon. No one shouted. No one threw blame like stones. They signed papers and gave samples. The nurse was quiet and kind. Results would take a few days. Waiting felt like standing on a thin bridge and feeling it shake. On the third day, the email arrived. Daniel read it alone first, then called them. Tyler came over within 20 minutes. Margaret poured tea again, as if warmth could hold the room together. Daniel opened his mouth and nothing came out. Margaret took the phone and read the line that mattered. Probability of paternity for Mr. Grant, 99.98%. No one moved for a breath, 2 breaths, 3. Tyler put his face in his hands. He did not cry loudly. His shoulders shook just once, and then he sat up straighter. Okay, he said, voice thin. Then I begin. What do you mean? Daniel asked. I mean, I'll do the paperwork, Tyler said. I'll speak to Emily and to a lawyer. I'll be there at the hospital. I'll pay what is needed and give what is needed, time and care. I will not be the shadow who leaves. Margaret felt something in her chest soften. It was not forgiveness yet, but it was the door that forgiveness uses when it decides to visit. That evening, Emily came by. She stood on the porch twisting a tissue. She looked smaller without her circle of friends and the pink dress. No makeup, just a face that had not slept. Daniel, she said. Please. I am sorry. I was proud, and then I was afraid, and then I was proud again to cover the fear. I wish I could go back. Daniel leaned on the doorframe. His eyes were gentle, and that made it harder for her. I believe you wish that, he said. I also believe we are exactly where our choices walked us. She nodded, tears running. I need help, she whispered. Not money. Help being better than I was yesterday. Margaret stepped forward and, to Emily's surprise, held out a clean towel. Sit, she said softly. Drink water. You're carrying a child who has no blame. Emily sat at the table where so many hard words had been spoken. She cried quietly into the towel. When she could speak, she said, I called the court clinic. I'll add Tyler to the forms. I'll agree to shared custody and whatever is healthy for the baby. She looked at Daniel. And I will sign the separation you asked for. I won't fight you. Daniel nodded once, in thanks and in ending. We will write this with care, he said. For the child. The weeks moved forward the way careful things do. slow, steady, with checklists and signatures. Tyler came to every prenatal visit. He listened. He learned to tuck a small blanket under Emily's back when her chair hurt. He never touched her without asking. Daniel sent a note with a list of baby books he had already bought. "For your house," he wrote. "They helped me when I was little." Margaret knitted a second pair of socks and left them in a brown paper bag on Emily's porch. No note. The bag said enough. The baby was born on a soft gray morning. A girl. She had a small, serious mouth and a calm way of breathing, as if she already knew storm's end. Tyler cried without hiding it. Emily slept, then woke, then cried too, but the crying had a cleaner sound, like rain after dust. Daniel visited the next day. He stood at the foot of the bed with his hands in his pockets. He looked at the baby and smiled with his eyes. "Hello," he said. "Be brave." Then he left a wrapped book, Goodnight Moon, on the chair and walked out before anyone could make his face break. A month later, Margaret took her sweater from the closet. The pink shadow was still there, pale now like a petal pressed in a book. She wore it to the park to meet Daniel for a walk. He brought coffee. They watched a father push a stroller down the path and a new mother laugh at nothing. The world kept being itself. "I don't know what to call this feeling," Daniel said. "It isn't happiness. It's peace," Margaret said. "It's what comes after you stop arguing with the truth." He looked at her sweater. "Looks good," he said softly. "It does," she answered. "Some things show their worth after they're tested." They walked in easy silence. The wind was gentle. The leaves made that small, kind sound they make when they forgive the branch for letting go. And if anyone asked about the stain, Margaret just smiled and said, "It's not a stain. It's a reminder that we chose honesty."